The coffee burned her tongue, but Sofia Wells barely noticed because she was too busy trying not to stare at the man across the conference table, who had just caught her in the middle of what could only be described as her worst presentation ever. She had stumbled over her words, dropped her notes, and somehow managed to click to a slide that still had "insert data here" plastered across it in red letters. The other executives from Morrison Industries were politely looking away, giving her the mercy of their averted gazes, but not him. Jason Kingsley sat at the head of the table, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. She wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Instead, she did what she always did when she was nervous. She minimized it. She laughed, waved her hand dismissively, and said something about how these things happen and it was not a big deal anyway. She began gathering her papers, already mentally drafting her resignation letter, when his voice cut through the room like a blade. "Don't look away." Sofia froze, her hand hovering over her scattered notes. She glanced up, confused. "Excuse me." Jason Kingsley leaned forward in his chair, his expression unreadable but his voice steady and clear. "I said don't look away. You're trying to minimize what you're presenting because you think we're judging you for a technical mistake. But I've been listening to your ideas for the past 20 minutes, and they're brilliant. The slide error means nothing. Your concept for restructuring our supply chain could save us millions, so don't look away from that. Don't diminish it." The room fell silent. Sofia felt her cheeks flush hot, but this time it was not entirely from embarrassment. There was something in the way he looked at her, something that made her feel seen in a way she had not experienced in years. Not pitied, not dismissed, but actually seen. She started, then stopped. She straightened her shoulders and met his gaze directly. "Thank you, I'll continue." And she did. With his eyes on her, she found her rhythm again. She talked through her proposals, her innovations, her vision for making Morrison Industries' logistics operation the most efficient in the industry. By the time she finished, the other executives were nodding, taking notes, asking questions that showed genuine interest. But Sofia kept finding her attention drawn back to Jason, to the slight smile that played at the corners of his mouth, to the way he listened like every word mattered. When the meeting ended, Sofia packed her things quickly, eager to escape before her adrenaline wore off and the mortification set back in. She was halfway to the elevator when she heard footsteps behind her. "Miss Wells." She turned to find Jason approaching, his hands in his pockets, his tie slightly loosened. Up close, he was even more imposing than he had been across the conference table. He had to be at least 6'2", with broad shoulders and the kind of presence that made people instinctively move out of his way. But his expression was gentle, almost curious. "Mr. Kingsley," she said, trying to keep her voice professional despite the way her heart was hammering. "Jason, please." He stopped a few feet away from her, maintaining a respectful distance. "I wanted to apologize if I put you on the spot back there. That was not my intention." "You have nothing to apologize for," Sofia said quickly. You saved me from making a huge mistake." I was about to walk out of there convinced I had ruined everything. "Why do you do that?" The question was direct but not unkind. "Minimize yourself, I mean." Sofia blinked, taken aback. "I don't," she stopped because the denial was automatic and untrue. She did do that. She had been doing it for years. I think if I acknowledge the mistake first, it hurts less when other people point it out." Jason nodded slowly, as if this made perfect sense to him. "I understand that. But in my experience, the people worth impressing are never the ones looking for your mistakes. They're looking for your potential." The elevator dinged and the doors slid open. Sofia glanced at it, then back at Jason. Something in this moment felt significant, like standing at a crossroads she had not realized she was approaching. "Would you have dinner with me?" Jason asked, and there was something almost vulnerable in the way he said it, like he was not entirely certain of her answer. "Dinner," Sofia repeated, her mind racing. "Like a business dinner?" "No," he said simply. "Like a dinner where I get to know you better and you get to know me. No agendas, no presentations, just conversation." Sofia knew she should say no. He was Jason Kingsley, the CEO of Morrison Industries, one of the most successful manufacturing companies in the country. She was a consultant brought in to assess their operations, hardly in a position to be dating the man who signed off on her contract. But when she looked at him, she did not see a CEO. She saw a man who had looked past her fumbling presentation and seen something worth paying attention to. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Yes, I'd like that." The smile that broke across his face was worth every bit of professional uncertainty that would follow. They met 3 days later at a small Italian restaurant tucked into a quiet corner of the city, far from the glass towers and power lunches of the business district. Sofia had changed her outfit 4 times before settling on a simple blue dress that made her feel confident without trying too hard. When she arrived, Jason was already there, standing when he saw her, pulling out her chair like this was something he did naturally, not performatively. "You found it okay?" he asked as she sat. "Your directions were very precise," Sofia said with a small smile. "Turn left at the bookstore with the cat in the window." "That cat has been there for 7 years," Jason said, settling back into his own chair. "I'm convinced it's immortal." They ordered wine, then food, and somewhere between the appetizers and the main course, Sofia forgot to be nervous. Jason had a way of asking questions that made her want to answer them, not because he was prying, but because he seemed genuinely interested. He wanted to know about her childhood in Seattle, her decision to study industrial engineering, the year she spent working in Japan that had shaped her entire approach to systems thinking. "And your family?" he asked as the waiter cleared their plates. "Are they still in Seattle?" "My mom is," Sofia said. "My dad passed away when I was 15. Heart attack, very sudden." She said it matter-of-factly because she had learned long ago that any other tone invited pity, and she hated pity. But Jason did not look at her with pity. He looked at her with understanding. "That must have been devastating." "It was," Sofia admitted. "But my mom, she's incredible. She went back to school, became a nurse, raised me and my brother on her own. She taught me that you don't minimize the hard things, you just keep moving forward through them." "Sounds like you did not always follow that lesson," Jason said gently. Sofia laughed. "No, I suppose I learned a different lesson along the way. Somewhere in my 20s, I started thinking that if I made myself smaller, if I asked for less, I'd be disappointed less often." "And has that worked?" "Not even a little bit," Sofia said with a rueful smile. "Mostly I've just been disappointed in myself for not trying harder." Jason reached across the table, not quite touching her hand but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his skin. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you came to Morrison Industries, even if it led to what you considered your worst presentation ever." "It really was terrible," Sofia said, but she was smiling now. "The beginning was rough," Jason conceded, "but the ending was extraordinary." They talked until the restaurant began to empty around them, until the waiter had refilled their water glasses 3 times and was starting to look pointedly at the clock. When they finally stepped outside, the night air was cool and clear, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement from an earlier rain. "Can I walk you to your car?" Jason asked. "I took a taxi," Sofia admitted. "Then let me drive you home." She should have said no. She should have maintained some professional boundary, some sense of propriety. But she did not want the evening to end, not yet, so she nodded and let him lead her to his car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than she made in a year. The drive to her apartment was too short. They talked about music, about books, about the travel they had both done and the places they still wanted to see. When Jason pulled up in front of her building, Sofia felt a pang of disappointment so sharp it surprised her. "Thank you for dinner," she said, her hand on the door handle. "I had a really lovely time." "Sofia," Jason said, and something in his voice made her pause. "I need to be honest with you about something." Her stomach tightened. Here it was, the catch. The revelation that would make sense of why a man like him would be interested in someone like her. "I asked you to dinner because I have not been able to stop thinking about you since that meeting," Jason continued. "Not because of your presentation, although that was impressive, but because of the way you gathered yourself back up after that mistake. The way you laughed at yourself and kept going. The way you looked at me like you were deciding whether to trust what I was saying or protect yourself from it." He turned in his seat to face her fully. "I don't do this, Sofia. I don't ask consultants to dinner. I don't mix business with my personal life, but there was something about you that made me want to break my own rules." Sofia's breath caught. "I don't do this either," she whispered. "I don't go to dinner with CEOs. I don't let myself be, I don't know, vulnerable like this." "Then maybe we're both trying something new," Jason said softly. She kissed him. She did not plan it, did not think about it, just leaned across the center console and pressed her lips to his. For a moment, Jason went still with surprise, and then his hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone as he kissed her back with a tenderness that made her chest ache. When they finally pulled apart, Sofia was breathing hard, her forehead resting against his. "That was unprofessional," she said. "Extremely," Jason agreed, but he was smiling. "I should go inside." "You should." Neither of them moved. "Tomorrow," Jason said finally. "Let me take you to breakfast before work, early before anyone else is in the office." "That's a terrible idea," Sofia said, "probably." "Okay, yes. 7 o'clock. I'll pick you up at 6:45. Sofia floated up to her apartment, her lips still tingling, her mind spinning. She had no idea what she was doing, no idea how this could possibly work out, but for the first time in longer than she could remember, she did not care. She was not going to minimize this. She was not going to protect herself from it. She was just going to let herself feel it, whatever it was. The next morning, Jason was outside her building at 6:43. They went to a diner that served the kind of enormous breakfast plates that working people needed before a long shift, and they sat in a corner booth and split a stack of pancakes while talking about everything and nothing. When they finally made it to the office, they arrived separately, maintained careful professional distance, and did not look at each other any more than necessary during the morning meeting. It was torture. They managed to keep their relationship, if that was what it was, quiet for nearly 3 weeks. They met for early breakfasts and late dinners, always at places far from the office, always careful not to be seen together by anyone from Morrison Industries. Sofia worked harder than she ever had in her life, determined to prove that whatever was happening between her and Jason was not affecting her professional judgment. She delivered report after report, each one more detailed and insightful than the last, and Jason reviewed them with the same critical eye he would have given any consultant's work. But in private, they were something else entirely. Jason took her to a jazz club where he knew the owner, and they sat in the back, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest as a saxophone wailed out something mournful and beautiful. Sofia brought him to her favorite bookstore, a cramped little shop that smelled like old paper and coffee, and showed him the poetry section where she had spent hours as a college student trying to make sense of the world. "Read me something," Jason said, pulling a slim volume from the shelf at random. "Here. Now. Why not?" So Sofia opened the book to a random page and read in a low voice, conscious of the other customers browsing nearby. The poem was about longing, about the space between wanting something and having it, and when she finished, Jason was looking at her with an expression that made her forget where they were. "I'm falling in love with you," he said quietly. Sofia nearly dropped the book. "Jason, I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but I need you to know that this is not casual for me. You're not casual for me." Sofia's hands trembled as she slid the book back onto the shelf. "I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted, "and it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because I don't know how this works. You're Jason Kingsley. You're a billionaire, you run a massive company, you have responsibilities and expectations and a whole world that I'm not part of. I'm just a consultant who's going to finish this project and move on to the next one." Jason took her hand, right there in the middle of the bookstore in full view of anyone who might see. "You're not just anything, Sofia, and I don't want you to move on to the next project. I want you to stay. Stay at Morrison Industries. Join us permanently. Not because of me, because of your work. You're exactly what we need, someone who can see our systems with fresh eyes and reimagine them entirely. I've already talked to the board about creating a position for you, Vice President of Operations Innovation. They approved it unanimously." Sofia stared at him. "You offered me a job." "I offered you a job you've more than earned," Jason corrected. "One you'd be perfect for. The fact that I'm desperately in love with you is completely separate." "That's not separate at all," Sofia said, but her heart was pounding with something that felt dangerously like hope. "Jason, if I take that job, everyone will think I only got it because of our relationship. Let them think it. Your work will speak for itself." He squeezed her hand gently. "But if you don't want the job, if you think it compromises something important to you, then don't take it. I'll still want to be with you. We'll figure something else out." Sofia looked down at their joined hands, at the way his fingers threaded through hers like they belonged there. She thought about her mother, who had taught her to keep moving forward through the hard things. She thought about that presentation, about the moment Jason had told her not to look away, not to minimize what she had to offer. She thought about all the times in her life she had made herself smaller to fit other people's expectations, and she made a decision. "I'll take the job," she said, "on one condition. Anything? We tell everyone about us, right away. I won't sneak around, and I won't let anyone think I have something to hide. If I'm going to do this, I'm doing it honestly." Jason's smile was brilliant. "Deal." The announcement went about as well as could be expected, which was to say it caused an absolute uproar. The other executives were shocked. The HR department went into overdrive ensuring every possible ethical guideline was being followed, and the company rumor mill went into hyperdrive. Sofia weathered it all with her head high, knowing that every whispered conversation, every skeptical look, was just something she would have to prove wrong through her work. And she did. Within her first 6 months as VP of Operations Innovation, Sofia implemented changes that streamlined Morrison Industries' entire supply chain, cutting costs by 18% while actually improving delivery times. She built a team of analysts and engineers who shared her vision for systems thinking, and together, they transformed the way the company operated. Jason supported her from a distance, never interfering with her decisions, never using his position as CEO to shield her from criticism or smooth her path. But in private, he was her refuge. After long days filled with meetings and pushback and the constant pressure to prove herself, Sofia would go to Jason's penthouse apartment downtown, and he would have dinner waiting, or a bath drawn, or sometimes just his arms open and ready to hold her while she vented about whoever had questioned her judgment that day. Michael from procurement told me today that my new vendor system was too complicated, Sofia said one evening, pacing Jason's living room with a glass of wine in her hand. Too complicated. As if he has not been using a system that requires 17 separate approval signatures for a single purchase order. Jason, stretched out on the couch, watched her with amusement. What did you say to him? I told him I would walk him through it personally until he understood it. Sofia took a long drink of wine. And then, I may have implied that if he could not figure out a system that my 22-year-old junior analyst mastered in an afternoon, perhaps he should consider whether he was still the right fit for his role. That seems diplomatic. I was extremely diplomatic. I wanted to tell him he was being willfully obtuse because he resented taking direction from someone who used to be an outside consultant. Sofia flopped down on the couch next to Jason, exhausted. Am I being crazy? Should I just let them do things the old way? You're not being crazy, Jason said, pulling her against his side. You're being revolutionary, and that always makes people uncomfortable. But you know what? What? 6 months ago, Morrison Industries was hemorrhaging money in our logistics division. Today, we're the most efficient operation in our sector. That's because of you, Sofia. So let Michael from procurement be uncomfortable. He'll come around when he sees his departmental efficiency ratings improve. Sofia closed her eyes, breathing in the familiar scent of Jason's cologne. How do you always know the right thing to say? Years of practice being uncomfortable myself, Jason said quietly. You think I did not face resistance when I took over Morrison Industries from my father? I was 28 years old, and half the board thought I was too young, too idealistic, too willing to change things that had worked for decades. But I learned that if you're going to lead, you have to be willing to be unpopular. You have to trust your vision even when everyone else is telling you you're wrong. Were you ever wrong? Sofia asked. Constantly, Jason admitted with a laugh. But I learned from it, adjusted, and kept going. That's all anyone can do. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Sofia's head on Jason's shoulder, his fingers tracing absent patterns on her arm. Finally, Sofia said, I got a call from my mom today. Yeah, how is she? Good, she wants to meet you. Jason sat up a little straighter. She does. I've been telling her about you for months. She says any man who can put up with me when I'm in full work mode is either a saint or a glutton for punishment, and she wants to determine which. Sofia smiled. I think she's mostly just worried I'm going to scare you off. Not possible, Jason said firmly. When does she want to meet? Next weekend. She could fly down, stay with me for a few days. Or she could stay in the guest room here, Jason offered. More space, and I'd love to have her. Sofia twisted to look at him. You'd be okay with that? With my mother staying in your apartment. Sofia, I love you. That means I want to know the people who made you who you are. Your mother raised you, shaped you, taught you how to be strong. Of course I want to meet her. Of course I want her to be comfortable. That night, after they had moved to Jason's bedroom, after they had made love with the kind of slow intensity that still made Sofia's breath catch, she lay awake watching him sleep. His face was softer in sleep, younger somehow, and she felt a wave of tenderness so strong it almost hurt. She had never expected this. Had never thought she would find someone who challenged her to be bigger, bolder, more authentically herself. But Jason did that every day in 100 small ways and a few very large ones. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Sofia reached for it carefully, not wanting to wake Jason. It was an email from the Morrison Industries board, sent to the executive team. She almost ignored it, Too tired for work matters, but something made her open it. The subject line read, "Quarterly Performance Review." Sofia's heart sank. The quarterly review was where the board evaluated each executive's performance and determined bonuses, promotions, and occasionally terminations. She had known it was coming, but she had been too focused on her work to think about what it might mean for her personally. She skimmed the email quickly. The board wanted a full presentation from each VP, detailing their accomplishments, challenges, and vision for the next quarter. Sofia's presentation was scheduled for the day after her mother's visit ended. Perfect timing, she thought wryly. Nothing like performing under pressure. When Sofia's mother arrived the following Friday, she was exactly as Sofia remembered her. Practical, sharp-eyed, and impossible to fool. Margaret Wells was 62 years old. With gray streaked hair she wore in a no-nonsense bun and the kind of sturdy build that came from years of nursing work. She hugged Sofia fiercely at the airport, then held her at arm's length and studied her face. "You look tired," Margaret said. "Thanks, Mom. You look great too. I'm serious. Are you sleeping enough? Eating properly?" "Yes, Mom, I'm fine, just busy." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Busy because of work or busy because of this boyfriend you won't stop talking about?" Sofia laughed. "Both. Come on, let's get your luggage." "Jason's making dinner for us tonight. He cooks. He's surprisingly good at it, actually." Margaret made a thoughtful sound that could have meant anything. Dinner that evening was both better and more terrifying than Sofia had anticipated. Jason had prepared a simple but elegant meal: roasted chicken with vegetables, and a salad that looked like it belonged in a magazine. He was charming and attentive, asking Margaret about her work, her life in Seattle, her opinions on everything from healthcare policy to the best way to make coffee. And Margaret, to Sofia's surprise, seemed genuinely taken with him. "So," Margaret said as they finished dessert, a chocolate cake that Jason admitted he had not made himself but had ordered from a bakery Sofia loved. "You run Morrison Industries." "I do," Jason confirmed. "That's a big responsibility." "It is. And you're dating my daughter who also works for you." "Mom," Sofia protested, but Margaret waved her off. "I'm not judging, I'm clarifying." Margaret looked at Jason steadily. "I'm sure you're aware that puts Sofia in a difficult position." "I am," Jason said seriously. "And I've done everything I can to make sure she's evaluated on her work alone, not our relationship. But I understand your concern, Mrs. Wells. If I were you, I'd be asking the same questions." "Call me Margaret, please." She took a sip of her wine. "Sofia tells me you're in love with her." "Mom," Sofia felt her face burning. "I am," Jason said, not looking away from Margaret. "Very much so." "And what happens if that changes? What happens to her job, her career, if you two break up?" "We won't," Jason said simply. "But if we did, if something happened that I can't imagine happening, Sofia would still have her position, her team, and my complete professional support. I would never let our personal relationship affect her career negatively. I'd resign first." Margaret raised her eyebrows. "You'd resign?" Without hesitation. Sofia's work at Morrison Industries is transformative. The company needs her far more than it needs me. Sofia felt tears prick her eyes. She had not known Jason felt that way, had not realized he had even considered what might happen if things between them ended. Margaret studied Jason for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay. Okay," Sofia repeated. "Okay, I like him," Margaret clarified. "He's honest, he clearly adores you, and he makes a mean roasted chicken. You could do worse." Jason's relieved laugh filled the apartment, and Sofia found herself laughing too, the tension that had been coiled in her shoulders finally releasing. The rest of Margaret's visit passed in a blur of meals and conversations and lazy morning coffees. Sofia took 2 days off work, something she never did, and just enjoyed being with her mother and Jason. They walked through the city, visited museums, sat in cafes, and talked about nothing important. And watching Jason with her mother, seeing how patient he was with Margaret's stories about Sofia's childhood, how genuinely interested he seemed in her mother's opinions, Sofia felt something shift inside her. This was not just love anymore. This was partnership, family, a future taking shape. On Margaret's last evening, after Jason had left to give them some private time together, Margaret sat Sofia down on the couch and took her hand. "You're happy," Margaret said. It was not a question. "I am," Sofia confirmed. "Happier than I've been in a long time." "Good. You deserve that, baby. You've worked so hard for so long, always trying to prove yourself, always thinking you had to be perfect." Margaret squeezed her hand. "But I hope you know you don't have to be perfect for someone to love you. Your father and we loved you exactly as you were. And Jason, I think he does too." Sofia's eyes filled with tears. "I miss Dad. I know, I miss him too, but he'd be so proud of you, Sofia, of the woman you've become, the work you're doing, the love you've found." Margaret smiled. "And he'd probably give Jason the same interrogation I did, just to make sure he was good enough for you." "Am I good enough for him?" Sofia asked quietly. He's a billionaire. He moves in circles I don't even know exist. What if I can't fit into his world?" "Then he'll change his world to fit you," Margaret said firmly. "That's what you do when you love someone. You make room for them, you adjust, you build something new together. And from what I've seen, that's exactly what he's trying to do." After Margaret left, Sofia threw herself into preparing for the quarterly review. She worked 18-hour days, refining her presentation, gathering data, anticipating every possible question the board might ask. Jason tried to help, offering to review her materials, but Sofia refused. She needed to do this on her own, needed to prove that she had earned her place at Morrison Industries through her work, not through her relationship with the CEO. The night before the presentation, Sofia was still in her office at 11 o'clock, running through her slides for the 100th time. She was so focused that she did not hear Jason come in until he was standing right next to her desk. "You're going to be brilliant tomorrow," he said quietly. Sofia jumped, her hand flying to her chest. "You scared me." "Sorry." Jason came around the desk and gently closed her laptop. "It's late. You need to sleep." "I need to practice." "You've practiced enough. Sofia, you know this material better than anyone. You could give this presentation in your sleep." He pulled her to her feet, his hands warm on her arms. "But you can't do it well if you're exhausted. Come home with me. Get some rest." "What if they hate it?" Sofia asked, and she hated how small her voice sounded. "What if the board decides I'm not worth the controversy, that it would be easier to just let me go?" "They won't," Jason said with absolute certainty. "But even if they did, even if tomorrow doesn't go the way we hope, you'd still be extraordinary. You'd still be the woman who revolutionized Morrison Industries operations in less than a year. And you'd still be the woman I'm in love with." Sofia let him lead her out of the office, too tired to argue. In the car, she rested her head against the window and watched the city lights blur past. When they got to Jason's apartment, she went straight to bed, and Jason lay beside her, his arm around her waist, his breath warm against her neck. "I'm scared," she whispered into the darkness. "I know," Jason murmured, "but you're also brave. You're the bravest person I know." The quarterly review took place in Morrison Industries' largest conference room with all 12 board members present along with the executive team. Sofia was the 4th VP to present, which meant she had to sit through 3 other presentations while her anxiety built to almost unbearable levels. Jason, sitting at the head of the table, caught her eye once and gave her the smallest nod of encouragement. When it was finally her turn, Sofia stood and walked to the front of the room on legs that felt like water. She pulled up her first slide, took a deep breath, and began. 10 months ago, Morrison Industries' logistics division was our biggest liability, she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. Today, it's our greatest asset. I'd like to tell you how we got here and where we're going next. For the next 45 minutes, Sofia talked. She presented data showing the cost savings her team had achieved, the efficiency improvements, the customer satisfaction increases. She showed projections for the next quarter, the next year, the next 5 years. She talked about the cultural changes she had implemented, the way she had built a team that valued innovation and continuous improvement. And through it all, she did not minimize a single thing. She owned her successes, acknowledged her challenges, and laid out a vision for the future that was ambitious and achievable in equal measure. When she finished, the room was silent. Sofia's heart sank. She had been too bold, too presumptuous. She had overreached. Then one of the board members, a stern woman named Patricia who had been with Morrison Industries for 20 years, began to clap. Slowly, the others joined in until the entire room was applauding. Sofia felt her face flush, but this time it was with pride, not embarrassment. "Miss Wells," Patricia said when the applause died down. "That was the most impressive presentation I've seen in my 2 decades on this board. You've done remarkable work." "Thank you," Sofia managed. The questions that followed were tough but fair, and Sofia answered each one confidently, drawing on the months of work she and her team had put in. By the time the review ended, she was exhausted but exhilarated. She had done it. She had proven herself. As the board members filed out, Jason lingered behind. When they were alone, he crossed the room and pulled Sofia into a hug so tight it lifted her feet off the ground. "I'm so proud of you," he said into her hair. "I did okay. You did more than okay. You were phenomenal." He set her down but kept his arms around her. "Sofia, I need to tell you something." Something in his tone made her tense. "What?" "The board, they were so impressed with your presentation that they want to promote you. They want to make you Chief Operating Officer." Sofia's mouth fell open. "Coo." "But that's Jason. That's the second highest position in the company." "I know. And you've earned it. But it would mean you'd be reporting directly to me, working even more closely with me than you do now. I wanted to tell you before they made it official, in case you have any concerns about that." Concerns? Sofia's mind was reeling. Jason, being COO at Morrison Industries, that's the kind of opportunity people spend their entire careers working toward. But you're right, it would change things between us. We'd be working together every single day. "We would," Jason agreed. "And I won't pretend that doesn't complicate things. But Sofia, I trust you completely. I trust your judgment, your integrity, your vision. And I think together we could make Morrison Industries into something truly special." Sofia thought about it for maybe 3 seconds before the answer became obvious. "Yes, I want the job. I want to do this with you." Jason's smile was radiant. "Yeah? Yeah," she kissed him, right there in the conference room where anyone could have walked in and seen them. "Let's build something amazing together." The next 2 years were a whirlwind. As COO, Sofia had authority and responsibility that sometimes still felt surreal. She and Jason worked side by side, transforming Morrison Industries from a solid but unremarkable manufacturing company into an industry leader known for innovation and efficiency. They complemented each other perfectly. Where Jason was visionary and big picture, Sofia was detail-oriented and systematic. Where he was diplomatic and patient, she was direct and action-focused. Together they were formidable, but it was not always easy. There were long days when they disagreed about strategy. When Sofia pushed for changes Jason thought were too risky, when Jason wanted to maintain traditions, Sofia thought were holding them back. They learned to argue productively, to listen to each other even when they were frustrated, to find compromises that honored both their perspectives. And through it all, their relationship deepened. They bought a house together, a beautiful old Victorian that they spent weekends renovating. Sofia introduced Jason to her college friends, and he folded seamlessly into her life. Jason brought her to charity galas and industry events, and Sofia learned to navigate his world with increasing confidence. They became a true partnership, in work and in life. On a Tuesday evening in spring, 2.5 years after that disastrous presentation that had brought them together, Jason took Sofia back to the Italian restaurant where they had had their first date. She was exhausted from a day of back-to-back meetings, and when Jason suggested dinner out, she almost said no. But something in his expression made her agree. The restaurant was exactly as she remembered it, small and warm and smelling like garlic and wine. Jason had reserved the same corner table they had sat at that first night, and as Sofia slid into her seat, she felt a wave of nostalgia so strong it made her chest tight. "You remember what we talked about that night?" Jason asked after they had ordered. "Everything," Sofia said with a laugh. "You asked me about my entire life story. You read me poetry in a bookstore," Jason countered, "and I told you I was falling in love with you. That was later, and I nearly had a heart attack. You told me you were falling in love with me too." Jason reached across the table and took her hand. "And that it terrified you." "It did," Sofia admitted. "I had no idea how we could possibly work. We seemed like such an unlikely match. And now I can't imagine my life without you in it." Sofia squeezed his hand. "You're my best friend, Jason, my partner in every sense of the word. You make me better, braver, more willing to take up space in the world." Jason stood up, still holding her hand, and Sofia's heart began to pound. He came around the table and, to her shock, dropped to one knee beside her chair. "Sofia Wells," he said, his voice steady but his eyes bright with emotion. "That day you walked into the Morrison Industries conference room and gave the worst presentation introduction I had ever seen. I had no idea you were about to change my entire life. But you did. You challenged me, inspired me, made me want to be worthy of you. And every day since then, I've fallen more in love with you." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it, revealing a ring that caught the candlelight and threw it back in brilliant sparks. It was perfect, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, elegant and unusual and completely Sofia. "I don't want to spend another day of my life without knowing you're mine forever," Jason continued. "Will you marry me?" Sofia was crying, she realized distantly, tears streaming down her face. But she was also smiling wider than she ever had in her life. "Yes," she managed. "Yes, of course, yes." Jason slid the ring onto her finger, and then he was standing and she was in his arms and they were kissing while the other diners applauded. When they finally pulled apart, Sofia looked down at the ring on her hand, then back up at Jason. "I love you," she said, and it felt like the most important thing she had ever said. "I love you too," Jason replied. "Always." They were married 6 months later in a ceremony that managed to be both elegant and intimate. Margaret cried through the entire thing, and Sofia's brother walked her down the aisle while a string quartet played. Jason's vows made half the guests tear up, talking about how Sofia had taught him that vulnerability was not weakness, but the ultimate courage. And Sofia's vows were about partnership, about building something beautiful together, about never looking away from what mattered most. The reception was held at the Morrison Industries headquarters rooftop garden, which Sofia's team had transformed into something magical with lights and flowers. and a dance floor that seemed to float above the city. They danced until midnight, surrounded by friends and family, and the colleagues who had become like family. And when they finally left, sneaking away to drive to the airport for their honeymoon in Italy, Sofia felt like her life had finally clicked into place. 3 years later, Sofia stood in the newly renovated conference room at Morrison Industries, her hand resting on her rounded belly, and listened to her team present their latest innovation. At 7 months pregnant with twin girls, she probably should have been on maternity leave already, but Sofia had never been very good at stepping back from work she loved. Beside her, Jason was trying very hard to look like he was not monitoring her every move for signs of fatigue or discomfort. "What do you think?" he murmured as the presentation concluded and the team filed out, chattering excitedly about next steps. "I think they're brilliant," Sofia said. "And I think we've built something really special here. A culture where people aren't afraid to take risks, to innovate, to challenge the status quo." "We learned from the best," Jason said, placing his hand over hers on her belly. One of the babies kicked, and his face lit up with wonder the way it did every time. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm carrying 2 tiny gymnasts who have decided my ribcage is their personal playground," Sofia said wryly. "But good, excited, terrified. Second thoughts about the names." They had decided to name the girls after their mothers, Margaret and Josephine, Jason's mother who had passed away when he was young. It felt right, a way of honoring the women who had shaped them while building their own family story. "No second thoughts," Sofia said. "Just hoping I can be half the mother mine was." "You'll be amazing," Jason said with complete certainty. "You've never been afraid of a challenge." Sofia laughed. "I'm pretty sure raising twins while running a Fortune 500 company qualifies as slightly more than a challenge." "Good thing you have me," Jason said, kissing her temple. "Partners remember partners," Sofia agreed. When the twins were born 6 weeks later, tiny and perfect and absolutely exhausting, Sofia discovered depths of love she had not known existed. Margaret and Josephine were different from each other from day one. Maggie with her serious expression and Josie with her easy smiles. Jason was an incredible father, getting up for night feedings, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floors at 3 in the morning with a crying baby while Sofia tried desperately to get a few hours of sleep. They took turns going into the office during the first 3 months, coordinating their schedules so one of them was always home with the girls. It was chaotic and messy, and sometimes Sofia was so tired she forgot what day it was, but it was also the happiest time of her life. She and Jason were building a family, creating something that was entirely theirs. When Sofia finally returned to work full-time, Morrison Industries had implemented a new parental leave policy that she and Jason had designed together. One that gave both mothers and fathers substantial paid time off and flexible work arrangements. Several other executives with young children took advantage of it immediately, and Sofia felt proud that they were changing not just their company's operations but its culture. On Sofia's first full day back, she walked into her office to find it filled with flowers and a note from Jason that read, "Welcome back, Mrs. Kingsley. We missed you." She smiled, tucked the note into her desk drawer with all the others he had given her over the years, and got to work. That evening, she came home to find Jason on the living room floor, surrounded by baby toys and making ridiculous faces at Maggie and Josie, who were shrieking with laughter from their play mat. He looked up when Sofia came in, his hair disheveled, and spit up on his shoulder and grinned at her with such unguarded joy that she felt her heart might burst. "How was your first day back?" he asked. "Good. Exhausting. I missed these two terribly." Sofia kicked off her heels and sank down onto the floor beside him, immediately reaching for Josie, who grabbed her finger and tried to stuff it in her mouth. But it felt good to be back, too, to remember who I am outside of being mom. "You're extraordinary," Jason said, like this was an established fact, "in every role you take on." Sofia looked around at her life, this beautiful, chaotic life they had built together. The house with toys scattered across the floor and family photos on every surface. The husband who looked at her like she hung the moon even when she was covered in baby drool and running on 4 hours of sleep. The daughters who were already so clearly their own people, ready to take on the world. "You ever think about that presentation?" she asked suddenly. "The one where I completely fell apart." Jason was quiet for a moment, bouncing Maggie gently. "I think about it all the time," he admitted. "I think about how you were about to walk out of that room, about to minimize everything you had worked for because of one technical mistake. And I think about how close I came to never knowing you." "Why did you stop me?" Sofia asked. "Really?" "Because I saw myself in you," Jason said simply. "All the times I had minimized my own worth, tried to make myself smaller to fit other people's expectations. And I thought, if I can help one person not make that mistake, if I can help her see what I see, then maybe I'll have done something that matters." He looked at her, his expression tender. "I had no idea you'd end up meaning everything to me." Sofia leaned over and kissed him, awkward with Josie still in her arms but needing him to know how much she loved him. When she pulled back, she said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For telling me not to look away. For seeing me when I was trying to hide. For loving me into becoming someone bigger and braver than I ever thought I could be." "Sofia," Jason said softly, "you were always that person. I just helped you see it." Years continued to pass, full and rich and sometimes overwhelming. The twins grew into curious, energetic toddlers who kept Sofia and Jason constantly on their toes. Morrison Industries continued to thrive under their leadership, expanding into new markets and becoming known not just for operational excellence, but for being one of the best places to work in the country. Sofia published a book about systems innovation that became required reading in business schools. Jason started a foundation focused on education and opportunity for underprivileged youth. They had their struggles, of course. There were difficult board meetings and failed initiatives and moments when they disagreed so fundamentally, it seemed impossible they would find common ground. There were sleepless nights with sick children and the constant juggling act of work and family. There were times when Sofia felt like she was failing at everything, not doing enough at work or at home, stretched too thin to do anything well. But through it all, they had each other. Jason was there on the hard days, reminding Sofia of her strength when she forgot it. Sofia was there for Jason when the pressure of running a billion-dollar company felt crushing, helping him remember why they were doing this work in the first place. They were partners in the truest sense, building a life that honored both their ambitions and their love for each other. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jason surprised Sofia with a trip back to the Italian restaurant where he had proposed. It had changed hands twice in the intervening years and was now under new management, but the corner table was still there, and Jason had arranged for them to have the entire restaurant to themselves for the evening. "This is excessive," Sofia said, laughing as she looked around at the empty dining room. "It's our anniversary," Jason said. "I'm allowed to be excessive." They ordered too much food and drank wine that was probably too expensive and talked about everything and nothing the way they always did. Sofia told Jason about Maggie's latest precocious question, about Josie's newfound obsession with dinosaurs, about the major contract Morrison Industries was close to securing. Jason told her about his plans for the foundation, about a conversation he'd had with a mentee that had moved him to tears, about how proud he was of everything they had built together. "You have any regrets?" Sofia asked as dessert arrived. "About how your life turned out?" Jason considered this seriously. "I regret that I didn't meet you sooner," he said finally. "That we didn't have more time together. But other than that, no, not a single one. Sofia thought about the scared, uncertain woman she had been when she walked into that conference room 10 years ago. The woman who had been ready to minimize herself, to make herself smaller, to protect herself from disappointment by never asking for too much. And she thought about who she had become, with Jason's love and support, the woman who had learned to take up space, to be bold, to believe in her own worth. "No regrets," she said, "just gratitude for you, for our family, for this beautiful life we've built." Jason raised his glass. "To 10 more years. To 50 more years," Sofia corrected, clinking her glass against his. "To forever." They lived that forever in all the ways that mattered. They watched their daughters grow into strong, confident young women who pursued their dreams with the same fearlessness their mother had learned and their father had always possessed. They continued to lead Morrison Industries together, stepping back gradually as they aged, but never fully retiring, too passionate about the work to let it go completely. They traveled the world, renovated their house half a dozen times, hosted countless dinners and holidays and celebrations. And through it all, they loved each other. In the big, dramatic ways and the small, daily ways. In the morning coffee, Jason made exactly the way Sofia liked it, and the way Sofia still kissed him goodbye every morning like it was the first time. In the way they still held hands during movies, still danced in the kitchen when a good song came on, still looked at each other across crowded rooms and shared silent conversations that no one else could understand. When they were both in their 70s, sitting on the porch of their Victorian house watching their grandchildren play in the yard, Sofia turned to Jason and said, "I'm glad I didn't look away." Jason, his hair white now but his eyes still as sharp and loving as they had been that day in the conference room so many decades ago, squeezed her hand. "Best decision you ever made." "Second best," Sofia corrected. "The best was saying yes when you asked me to marry you." "I disagree," Jason said. "The best decision was having the courage to keep going that day, to not let your fear win. Everything else followed from that." Sofia leaned her head on his shoulder and watched the sun set over the garden they had planted together, over the life they had built from a moment of vulnerability and connection. She thought about all the times she could have turned away, could have protected herself, could have played it safe. And she thought about all she would have missed if she had. "I love you," she said, the same words she had spoken thousands of times before, but that never lost their meaning. "I love you too," Jason replied. "Always have, always will." And as the last light faded from the sky and their grandchildren's laughter filled the air, Sofia knew that this was what happiness looked like. Not perfect, not without challenges or struggles, but real and deep and built on a foundation of mutual respect, trust, and a love that had only grown stronger with time. They had built an extraordinary life together, and it had all started with a simple command. Don't look away. She never had.